Anna, we're going to be late. I had a final look in the mirror to make sure everything was where it needed to be, and to check my makeup, with my mom yelling in the background, threatening everyone that she was going to leave with or without us. I have a pretty big family, and had been living on my own for about 4 years now because of a very abusive relationship, and pretty much losing everything as a result of this. I was now living back home with my 2 kid sisters and brother, and parents. One of the rules of living back with my parents is having to go to church every Sunday. I personally do not believe in God, so it was a bit of a struggle when I had to go. The church meeting was over rather quickly, and we all headed home. When we got back, my phone had a bunch of missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. Thinking it might be something urgent or about a job, I called it back. Of course it was my ex. "What do you want?" He replied, "I miss you." "Is that all, or did you have something important?" He then said, "Well, CPS contacted me and wanted to know if we were taking our parenting classes together or separate." There was a long pause, and I said, "I'm sorry, Kyle, but I'm not getting back with you, and I have no interest in seeing you. So, to answer your question, we'll take them separately." Kyle had started getting bad into drugs, and got to the point where he couldn't keep a job. So he stayed home with our son, and I was the one working. One day he was driving and got pulled over with drugs in the car, and he had our son with him. So CPS got involved, and I moved out. I got off the phone and was upset from the conversation, so I told my mom I needed to go for a walk. The sun was just going down, and I walked over towards a park near my parents' place. I sat on a bench, watching a family play hide and seek together. I envied them. Why couldn't I have a normal family? The street lights turned on, and the family gathered their things and went home. I was left alone, and said, well, I better get going too. I got up and heard a child laughing. I looked up at the swings, and no one was there. Then I heard it again. It was coming from the jungle gym. There was a little boy who looked shockingly like my son. I said, "Hey, where are your parents?" He just kept running around laughing and going down the slide. I walked closer and spoke louder. "Hey, where is your mother?" Still he ignored me. As he ran past me and up the stairs to get on the slide again, I decided to stop him the next time he ran past. He flew down the slide and passed me again, but this time I grabbed his shoulder and turned him around. I took a few steps backwards and saw that his eyes were completely black. I didn't know what to do. But then he spoke and said, "Can I go to your house?" I started walking away, but I felt bad, like I did need to take him with me. I ignored his question, and he started following me. I didn't look back, but could hear his little steps behind mine. My house was in view, and the child asked me again, "Can I please go in your house with you?" I replied this time, but didn't stop walking. "I'm sorry, hun, I don't think it's a good idea." I heard his footsteps stop. He then said, "So you are going to abandon me like you abandoned Cody?" Which was my son's name. I was beyond creeped out, and I ran the rest of the way home. I practically fell in the door, and my mom was in the front room. "Anna, are you okay?" I said, "No, there's a creepy kid following me." I looked out the window, and there was nothing but the empty street. I still think about that kid sometimes and wonder how he knew about my son. And I wonder what might have happened if I would have decided to let him in the house. It almost felt like a dream. I woke up to my dog Lucy barking. She was upright on the bed where my husband and I were sleeping, with our 22-month-old daughter, staring at our door like an unknown stranger was out there rummaging around. I thought she was just freaking out over a house noise. We'd only had her for 3 months, and she was still a puppy. It could have been anything. Our roommate, a creak from the house settling, the awnings moving outside in the breeze. I wasn't too concerned initially. I decided the best bet would be to open the door and show her nothing was there. It sounds a bit silly, but it's what we do for our daughter when she gets scared, and I figured it would work with the puppy, too. I opened the door and she raced to the front. She stood there, snarling at the door. It was an angry, violent growl, one I had never heard her make before. I looked groggily at her and opened the baby gate blocking the doorway, planning to open the door and show her everything was okay. The second my hand reached for the deadbolt, Lucy went wild. She started barking and jumped toward me, and when I touched the metal, she suddenly changed her temper. She whimpered, almost like she was afraid, and backing down. As her mannerism changed, so did mine. I wasn't calm anymore. My heart was racing and sinking at the same time. I had been flooded with a mixture of fear and dread. I looked through the peephole. I can't explain why I looked, but I did. Outside were two kids. One was just a smidgen shorter than the other, and didn't look much younger. I'm 21, and she looked to be 16 or 17. She was slender and pale. Her hair was a light shade of honey blonde, and she wore it long, about mid-back, with long, thin, blunt bangs in the front that covered most of her eyes. She wore jeans, a light wash, that's popular right now, and a thin-looking, olive-colored pullover-style hoodie. She held the hand of a small girl who looked to be around 3 or 4 in the same styled jeans and a button-down ivory cardigan. The smaller one looked at the floor shyly but had the same shade of hair, tied back in a ponytail. She held a stuffed toy under her arm, and it was identical to the one my daughter has, as was their style of dress. Had it not been for the feeling of overwhelming dread and fear, I probably would have asked these children in and given them some tea or hot chocolate to get them out of the bitter cold. Something about them seemed off. At this point, I hadn't made any noise. I hadn't shushed the dog or grumbled, nothing. I hadn't turned on any lights. These kids had no indicators. I was at the door. The older one spoke. She had a voice that was mature, confident, strong. She held her head tilted downward, and I couldn't see her eyes. She said, "We have to use your phone." I stood frozen in fear. How did she know I was there? She raised her head to face me directly, and that was when I saw her eyes. There was a reason I couldn't see them through her bangs before. They were black, or midnight blue, or a dark, dark purple. They were otherworldly. She said, "Our mother is worried." As someone who has always been interested in creepy stories, I knew what she was the second she looked at me through the door. I have never been one to believe in these things. As an atheist and skeptic when it comes to the paranormal, I had written off many a ghost stories from friends and family members eager to tell their tale. I didn't believe it. Still, I couldn't rationalize my way out of this. I was standing with nothing but a thin wooden door between me and a black-eyed kid. There was no questioning what was right in front of me. I did not answer her. Slowly and silently I backed away from the door, Lucy still cowering at my ankles. She kept talking. "Just let us in to use your phone." I took another step back, and with that step, the tone changed. At first she seemed polite. When I took that second step back, she became commanding, almost hostile. "We're not going to hurt you. If we wanted to do that, we would have broken in. I'll ask again. May we come in and use your phone?" Lucy snarled at the door, and I inched backward, though something inside me seemed to be slowly pulling me back toward the door. It wasn't a physical pulling so much as a subconscious need to go back and let them in. I got to my room, covered up the window, locked the door, and sat there in the dim light of the nightlight. I heard her call me back to the door once more, and then quiet. I didn't go back to sleep that night, and I haven't slept right since. I know about from reading other stories. They can't come in without permission. I know that they haven't hurt anyone, but I still fear I'll be the exception. When I told my husband, he said it was just a dream. He keeps telling me to forget it. but this lingering feeling of sadness, this dread when the house is silent at night, this fear of a knock at the door, this tells me otherwise. I was riding the bus back home after work, and it was around 1 a.m. I'm a security guard and often work odd hours. So I'm sitting there, and this kid gets on the bus and sits across from me. He was wearing a bunny onesie, like you wear as pajamas, and he had a Pikachu backpack on. Besides his weird outfit, he was a regular-looking kid. He looked to be about 10, maybe a bit older. What struck me about him at first was that he was chewing on what looked like a cigar, not smoking it. What kind of child would have a cigar in his mouth and be riding the bus alone at this hour? So, I was just looking at him while he stared out the window and chewed on the cigar, and all of a sudden he turned and looked at me. His eyes were completely pitch black. My heart started beating like a mad motherfucker, and I felt my body temperature rising. I was starting to panic, and I had no idea why. I was just absolutely terrified of this kid. Then he grinned at me, and his teeth were all covered in tobacco bits and brown juice, the cigar clamped between them. I almost screamed, but instead I had the presence of mind to just get up and take the seat right behind the driver. I calmed down a bit after that, but I kept an eye on the kid. He ended up chatting with some lady that got on, and they were still talking when I got off. I later convinced myself that the kid was just trolling me, having fun with a pair of those contacts. Now I wonder if it was real.